Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. Our checks reveal there is this yawning gap between theory and practice, as some schools do not have the necessary equipment in their science laboratories for practical work. For example, at the KJB SHS, around a single laptop for ICT lessons. Let's watch this report put together by Peter Senu as we dilate on this all-important subject.
There are so many things we lack in this lab. For example, the gas pipeline is not working. It's not in a good shape. Some of the chemicals, they are obsolete. They are no more in use. They are out of date. So we need a replacement for some of them. Yeah. If you check the lab right now, we only have some few hydrochloric acid left. So when it comes to the practicals like our activities, we suffer a lot. Chemistry practicals, students have to feel it individually. So when you do it like that, when the master is doing it here, it serves as just a demonstration. So it's definitely affecting the students. So they have to feel it themselves.
Sometimes when we are about to do the practical, because of the inadequate apparatus or equipment, we come as a group. But for the chemistry, we need to do individual so that we can feel the thing. But because of the inadequate apparatus, we come as a group to do it. So some of us don't understand.
Pipelines have spoiled for some years ago, and due to this, students are not able to perform practicals such as the heat experiment. So the only thing we do here is that a teacher will stand and do the whole thing, and when it's being done, students are to see and copy, of which you don't feel the reality of the experiment. So when you get to your WASI and you have to do the same experiment, then you find yourself wanting.
Biology lab here, I think we have certain equipment which we can use for now. Just that I think we need a projector. As you are seeing, we are just using my laptop to teach, and then we also need a water bath.
Talking about projector, is that why the students are crowded in front of one laptop?
Yes, actually, we need the projector so that at least we can view from afar. If not, I mean, they can watch from afar. We just need a projector. Anytime we want to do test for any food substance, we need the water bath, like I already said. So in place of the water bath, we are using the rice cooker. Dip the rack inside, and then what I do is that we put the test tubes inside so that it can be properly held together in place.
Some of the items we don't have it, such as the gas pipes, so we can't even perform the heat experiment in physics, and it is really much disturbing. And then also the biology lab, for instance, we don't have certain solutions which will make us do practicals such as food test, and also we don't have a water bath for heat source in doing this food test experiment, and it really makes us not to do the experiment to our satisfaction.
Some of the equipment we have are old and they are no longer functioning, so we need new ones. The ones supplied by the government is not enough to cater for the number of students that we have. Looking at the nature of the lab, some of the things, the benches are not in good order. As you can see, they have broken. Others have been eaten by weevils. So I'm appealing to the old students and the government to help us.
So this is an issue bigger than most of us would realize. I recall my days in senior, well, not high school, secondary school back in the day. And even then, we faced these problems. But as a country that wants to industrialize, how can we keep on like this? How do you expect the future physicist to operate without the right tools? The future biologist, the future this and that, chemist, how do they operate? You don't have the water bath. You can't perform the litmus test. You can't do anything. In recent times, we also saw the bit about, I hear the NSMQ, right? It's the biggest we have in our country, yet at the same time, we don't even have proper science laboratories. One of the schools had to present general arts students for the National Science and Math Quiz on the back of some of these very happenings. So it's very disturbing. Where are we going if we want to change our script as a country and boost STEM if we don't even have laboratories? Yeah, curious, right? Joining us for that discussion, Divine Kpe. He is Research Fellow with Africa Education Watch. He joins the conversation this morning. We also have Emmanuel Okwe, First National Secretary, Ghana Association of Science Teachers. Gentlemen, thank you for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Emmanuel, let me start with you. You are First National Secretary of the Ghana Association of Science Teachers. When you look at the teaching of science, even a decade ago, and you compare it to today, specifically in respect of science, laboratory, equipment, and improvement, are we doing any better? Or are we retrogressing? Or are we just at a stable point and not faring any better?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question, and a very good morning to all the viewers.
Right.
If you ask me from my standpoint, I'm going to say that we would have wished, actually, as a country for now, we should be doing better than what we are doing, actually. Yes, because we are all talking about STEM. And for us, we have agreed that that is the only way forward. We need to do practical science all throughout. The theory isn't helping in any way. But then here is the case, the materials are equally not available, and then the labs are broken down, and we have a lot of issues so far as that area is concerned. We have been trying as an association to really encourage improvisation. But however, we need government to have to be committed into providing the right equipment. Yes, they are doing quite okay. They are providing some of the materials. Quite recently, just this year, we had about 200 schools that science teachers were trained to use new equipment. But then our problem is, how soon will this go to almost all the 726 or 29 senior highs and technical schools we have in the country? You realize that the number is quite low. So that is what we are really, really praying for.
Right. So you're praying for that. In the interim, in the meantime, interestingly, there is a policy by government to create, we're building new STEM schools. And that has been a thorny issue, because I've interacted with the likes of former Chancellor of the University of Ghana, Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah, and he said, it beats my imagination. We have hundreds of senior high schools that we've not been able to fit with proper science labs, even science-oriented schools. Yet we're now going outside of that context to create other schools or build other schools. How does that wash on you as an association?
Well, thank you very much again. For us as guests, we are looking at two things. Now, currently what is running out in the system has to do with the STEM. And we cannot really be left out so far as that is what is happening. The entire world is talking STEM, and then we can say we are waiting before we go in there. Yes, so whilst we're starting, that is very important. But then alongside that, it should be a two-way thing. Once we are building the STEM schools so that we can get the 21st century learners right into it, so that they don't also miss out so far as the world is concerned. Yet, alongside that, we expect that the old laboratories, the various science schools should equally also be finished. And that is what we are actually advocating for. Yes, indeed. We know, science study itself with the equipment, etc., is really capital intensive. And at this juncture, we would only have to call in all, so that everybody should be able to come on board and then assist. Gone were those days we had a lot of people, a lot of industries that were ready to come in and support. But it looks like those kind of supports are a bit down this time. And that is what we are calling for. If we all understand that indeed it is science that is actually going to propel our development as a country, and so we need to go in, and it is practical science that can do it, then it means all of us will have to come in. And that way we'll be able to move forward. But I will say, yes, so far as we are concerned as guests, we wouldn't say that then it's wrong to leave, the STEM issue out and then totally concentrate here. We can do both ways. Whilst this one is ongoing, we need to work on this one alongside it. And that is what we are praying for. Thank you.
Let me come to you, Divine. When it comes to science education in Ghana or STEM, is it up to scratch? And I ask the question from a certain hindsight or foreground. It has to do with this. The NSMQ is big. It is huge in Ghana. But in recent times, for example, when we had some of them in the United Arab Emirates, Dubai to be specific, there were challenges. And we're competing on global standards. So they were told to arrange, was it the stomach or the internal organs of a human being? They struggled. They got it right. And I've had the managing director here. They got it right in the end. But it took them more time compared to people from other parts of the world. The question is, these are the same people we're trying to catch up with. So if we're not catching up with them even at this level, the best brains we have, where do we go from here? So is our science education up to scratch?
All right. Thank you, Benjamin, and good morning to your cherished viewers. Our science education, I believe, although we have been talking about it for a very long time, it is in this recent development that we have seen some level of commitment to it. Right from the basic school level to the senior high school, there's a little commitment when it comes to science practical education. There's a disconnect between the practical aspects and then the theory. At the basic school level, teachers have been trained to improvise. But in the 21st century, you shouldn't even be encouraging improvisation in your classroom. Students should be able to feel the real material and use it, because they are contemporary in other countries that they will be rubbing shoulder with as far as the 21st century is concerned. They are not doing improvisation. So as much as possible, you should also be encouraging that your students are using the right material in the development of their science education. But that is not the case. And therefore, teachers too, they don't want to improvise. And therefore, science is actually theoretical at a basic school level, because it takes a lot of time for you to go into improvisation, go into the community to look for material, or even at times to buy it yourself. It's a whole lot of process, and then spend time to develop also another time. So mostly teachers will disregard that aspect of improvising local materials to teach science education. And at the secondary school level, where much emphasis has to be placed on it, also, we have seen that, especially in less endowed areas or underserved senior high school, the situation as far as the teaching of science is concerned is not encouraging. The video you've played earlier tells the story. It is the situation in most of the underserved senior high school that they do practical science, but they don't do any practical work, or the practical work they do is inadequate. The lab that they have are not functional enough. Some of them are not big enough to accommodate the student, and therefore they have to go in batches. By the time the students have to go in batches, they have limited time to spend on each batch that comes. So we have a whole lot of challenge, more especially in the underserved areas. When we go to the schools that are well-resourced, I'll say it is basically because of their old students that have been providing some significant intervention, especially all the mission schools. There have been some intervention from their religious that they are affiliated to. So for me, I believe government has a lot to do to improve science education in the country. And I must appreciate the fact that it is one of the priorities, if not the topmost priority on the radar of the education minister. Every opportunity he has to speak, we know that he will not end the presentation, the speech, without mentioning STEM education. That tells the emphasis that he's placing on STEM education in the country, and that is commendable. What we have also seen is that, yes, to some level, we begin to see the channeling of resources into the development of science education at the senior high school level. We're talking about the construction of 20 STEM centers. 10 senior high school have to be upgraded to science model school. We are witnessing science academy also being built. Those are some of the inputs, and teachers are being trained, especially under the secondary education improvement project. More teachers are also being trained to equip their skills as far as the teaching of science is concerned. So recently, I would say we have begun to see some level of intervention, and it's going to take a bit of time for us to get there. But I must
unfortunately,
admit that,
Divine, unfortunately, time is not something we have as a country. We don't have a lot of it. The gap between us and even other African countries and what they are doing is so huge. It is yawning. And if we don't do something speedily, we're not going to get there. So I don't know when you say, yes, we need to do these things, but how much time really do we have? That is my problem. We need to industrialize. We need to catch up with the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's true. If you look at the Program for International Student Assessment, it's when it looks at us, our performance at the science level. In any case, the PISA program, which is the Program for International Student Assessment, is for 15-year-old students. That probably they should be in junior high school. The assessment of that tells that at the end of education, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa and also in Ghana, at the end of their junior high school education, when they are assessed in mathematics and then other science-related areas, you would have appreciated that the 11.6 years they've spent in school, it just equal to about 5.6 years. So it means they have lost a lot of contact in studying science and mathematics. So even at the basic school level, although the students are going through 11.6 years over like that in basic school, the knowledge they acquire in STEM-related area is not enough. So that is the issue we are talking about. We are already late, but once we have also realized that we are late and we need to catch up with the rest of the world, that is also okay that we have identified the fact that we need to catch up. And as I said, we are beginning to see the intervention, and I appreciate our position has all been that when it comes to the development of this whole STEM issue in Ghana, what is the policy document so that we can all move along? What do we want to be and where are we and where do we want to reach? That is very important. So I acknowledge the fact that this particular minister is putting much energy into the development of STEM education in Ghana. And we have seen some of the senior high school, especially this particular period from last year to this year, we've noticed that some science equipment have been supplied to senior high schools for them to enhance their academic work. But there are a lot of underserved areas that are needed to be caught up to. And one challenge I have seen when it comes to the secondary education improvement plan is that although they are to have some amount of grants to address some of these challenges, the grant either is inadequate or there's a delay or there's a channeling of money to other priority areas. So science area also doesn't have enough of the money from the SIP for their improvement. So what it tells is that we need to relook at the disbursement of the SIP money that goes to the deprived schools that have been enlisted for the secondary education improvement plan, so that they can also use that to improve their STEM participation at school level.
I'll be getting shortly to my colleague Manuel Kranting, who is also on the beat when it comes to the National Science and Math Quiz. He gets to these schools and sees their science laboratories and all of that. I'll be connecting with him shortly. But Emmanuel, just a quick take. You know, it brings to mind again an interaction I had with Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah, and he talks even about linking it, our health system. So the medical school, right? You would notice that just about 100 schools are the ones who have been producing the medical doctors, or whose students have been getting access to these medical institutions. We've not been able to break that chain. It is still the same small group. My school is in there, other elite schools are in there, and that is it. How do we break this system? Part of it is the discussion we're having about more science laboratories, but what more should we be doing?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My stake also has to do with the elite schools, let's say that they already have made their way out. Their names are already there. So anytime you have students coming from those areas, yeah, it's quite easy to get them. But I want to believe that we can equally also extend a hand and then also begin to assess students that are coming from the other deprived areas as well, those who actually do excel. Most of the time, because it has to do with resources, we have had several complaints of students who you'd really see have done so well and actually qualify, but cannot make it just because they will not be able to pay the fees and all that. But then those from the elite areas definitely would have the support and will continue. So as a country, it's one of the things that we are equally also calling out for, so that if students from such areas would sort of get some rebates, some scholarship, some funds that will help them to assess fully so that they can equally also go in, that would be very good. Then again, probably the intake is also another thing. You see, we have a whole lot of issues when it comes to the number of students probably we want to pick for the medical schools and all that. So that is a whole lot of policy issues that needs to come in, a whole lot of discussions that would have to come in, and then a broad look at the spectrum of students who are selected so that those from the other areas could equally be given opportunities. I think when that is done, we'll be able to go make a headway.
Right. Divine and Emmanuel, do hold for me. Let me bring in Manuel Kranting, my colleague. He's always on the beat when it comes to the NSMQ. Manuel, good morning to you. Thank you for joining. I'd like you to tell us in twofold. I heard you talk about a school sometime during this current NSMQ experience where they even fielded general arts students. I would like you to chip in that bit. But from where you are and what you've seen so far as the regional competitions have been held, what is the state of these schools' science laboratories?
Also, Ben, good morning again, and thanks for having me. Essentially, what we've learned in these past couple of weeks here in Ghana with the regional rounds of qualifiers, but also in Dubai, as you mentioned, while with the team of winners, not just the winners though, the team of finalists. So we had students from Qatar SHS, we had students from Presec Legon, and then of course the champions, the defending champions from 2021 Pempek College. Now, you get a sense, and their teachers, admittedly reckon that the problem really is with the amount of resources that they have to be able to bring in the students in terms of practical training. And so even though they have seen, for instance, at the Sharjah Science Museum in the UAE, they were asked to rearrange the digestive system of a human being. It was a dummy. And they had
they have they have learned it, so they know where what is supposed to go to, but they had not by themselves been able to arrange it ever before. And their teachers, they tell you that, well, we have a model that we, for instance, point to with a pointer and show them this is the abomasum, this is the the stomach, and so on and so forth. And that's what you have. And so in Dubai, even though they were able to arrange it, when they had to do a steeplechase, it's sort of a timed regimen to be able to arrange it, they could not. So they had to be allowed to do it at their own pace. That was when they were able to do it. And here in the regional qualifiers in the 2022 edition of the competition, the reality is even more staggering in the sense that, for instance, in the Bono East region, we're told that there's close to 50 senior high schools in the region. And out of all of these schools, you have about half of them not offering, science courses. And the reason that they don't offer these science courses is that they do not have a functional science laboratory. And so most of the schools, from Kwatin and Koma SHS to Yeboah Suama SHS, and to quite a host of other, schools that came competing in this year's regionals, they are schools, they not have science laboratories. And so some of them, even for instance, from Kwatin and Koma SHS, were, general art students. And one of them told me that during their training, they had to, be trained by integrated science teachers. And you know that there's a very, distinct variation between integrated science teachers and then the specific elective course teachers like biology, like chemistry, like physics, and so on and so forth. They tell me that when some of these, practical instruments and so on are mentioned and their uses are dictated to them, they have to imagine, what the teachers are telling them to be able to internalize the concept of their uses and their functionality, so that when they get into the competition and they are asked the question, they are able to recollect by dint of imagination. That is not what you want to be doing, in a period where, the world is moving fast into the space of STEM. And the Bono East Regional SDMI coordinator tells me that in the past couple of months, there's been some movements from government towards, trying to equip some of these, under-equipped schools to get these science practical instruments. However, when we got to the Upper West region, in the Upper East region, another leg of that problem showed itself. And that was the fact that some of the schools, and by extension, the regional education directorates are trying to improvise. And that is mapping some of these underdeveloped schools to what you would call the elite schools that are, very well resourced, or at least better resourced. The problem, however, is that they are not able to. So, for instance, if I were in school A, which was underdeveloped, and there's a school maybe about 50 kilometers, 30 kilometers, or 25 kilometers away from my school, which has better resources, this mapping is done such that school A will be some sort of a mentee of school B, so that school A will use the science lab of school B. The problem is that the schools are not able to transport themselves into school B. They have broken down, buses, broken down vehicles, and so on and so forth. And so even though there's an option to be explored in utilizing other science resource facilities in other schools, they cannot go there because they do not have the means to get there. And so most of them are really frustrated and hand-tied, so that they only have to make do of the theoretical content in the textbooks and the course content materials that they have as teachers and as students. And when you put that against the global trend of practicality and innovation and so on and so forth, you get a staggering sense that some of our students, and indeed quite a lot of our students here in Ghana, seem to be left behind. And so most of them tell us that their call is for government to quicken its assessment of senior high schools which do not have the science resource facilities, so that they are able to quickly provide for them the facilities so that they can continue teaching the students. And so if you had the very best of the students that we had, at least by virtue of the National Science and Maths Quiz in 2021, admitting, and their teachers also doing same, that they do not have so much in terms of science resource facilities to be able to inculcate the practical aspects of the teaching and learning, then you can only imagine what will be left of the not so elite schools in the Upper West region, in the Upper East region, the Bono East region, in the Half region, and so on and so forth. And so, Benjamin, that's really the sense of what we are getting, at least by way of our road trip with these senior high schools. And I may just chip in that the National Science and Maths is beyond the euphoria and beyond the competition that we see on stage. The competition itself is exposing some of these lapses within our educational system, so that duty bearers, and by extension policymakers and supervising agencies will be able to quickly reach out to these schools and bring them up to the level
tell me though, right before you let go of us, I just want to find out, with this picture that has been painted, for you, because you're on the ground, you get to see these schools, interact with the students and all of that. In some 30 seconds, what would be the level of seriousness that you see then as a country are wanting to build ourselves when it comes to science education? In some 30 seconds, what picture does that paint for you?
Well, Ben, you may talk about the focus of the education minister in building these STEM academies, but the already existing schools and pretty much the young schools are struggling to find their feet. And so while we focus on building these STEM academies to enroll more specialized students in them, we should also not forget about the schools that are struggling, offering other courses and actually attracting a chunk of the students. Some of these schools have as many as 2,000 students, 1,500, 1,800. And so we would want to focus and zero in on some of these schools that are struggling, rather than, en masse focus on these new STEM academies, Ben.
Right. Manuel, you've been a wealth of information. Thank you for joining us this morning, and all the best as you go about your activities. Manuel Krante, my colleague there. I'm wrapping in the studio with Emmanuel Okwe and Divine Claire. Emmanuel, I'll come back to you for starters. So beyond all that we've said here, and a lot of the time, my problem with our country, Ghana, is that we talk a lot and do very little. What do we do practically? Hearing what Manuel has said and trying to push this forward. Look, even the science-oriented schools, the big ones, when you go there and you look at their science facilities, some would shock you. They are collecting dust. There's practically little for the students to deal with. Where do we go from here, Emmanuel? Do we have Emmanuel Okwe with us?
Thank you very much. Generally, we have a lot to do. And in fact, it's not just government, but even we as teachers. We have so much to do. And this is what GASP is trying to do. Most of the schools don't really have lab technicians. The lab technicians are the ones who are actually prepared so that at any point in time, they assist the teachers in doing the practicals. But then again, due to economic situations, most of them have moved into the industry and left the labs. So we'll have just the general teachers who sometimes will have to act as the lab technicians as well as that. And that also makes their work quite a bit difficult. So what we are doing as an association is offering regular training to the teachers who are doubling as that, as well as training more of the lab technicians to equally assist the teachers into handling this. If we all don't wake up and see the need for us to equally contribute towards this, and we allow or we leave everything out for government to shoulder alone, definitely it's going to take us more years. But then what do we do to the little that we have? And that is why we call on all our teachers with a regular training so that they can equally help in handling this. Because areas where you have the labs, we expect that the labs would have to be properly handled and then effectively and efficiently used. Most times you realize that the chunk of the students are doing other non-science areas, but all students are doing integrated science. And so what we are advocating is even those who are doing the integrated science would have to be given the opportunity to visit the labs so that they can equally have a hands-on in the lab. If this would be done, then we'll start changing the story. But then if we are still going to continue going the other way, only those who are doing sciences are those to go to the labs, then we would have a school of over 4,000. You have just about 1,000 who are the science students. What about the remaining 3,000 who are all doing the home economics, who are doing, all of them are doing integrated science?
Right.
We leave them all behind, yes. So yes, what we are doing as an association is push more of our teachers, train more to understand that we need to make the integrated science more practical, whilst we still call on government as well as other stakeholders to equally support. I think that is the way forward.
Emmanuel Okwe, thank you for joining the conversation. First National Secretary with the Ghana Association of Science Teachers. Thank you so much for your time, Emmanuel. Divine Kpe, you'll have the final word as we move on.
Benjamin, yes, let me once again underscore the initiative of the Education Minister to improve science education in the country. But primarily, we have all agreed that there's more work to be done, especially in the underserved areas, while we continue to invest more in other infrastructure, especially new infrastructure. We must not lose sight of the underserved areas where the delivery of science education is relatively poor due to lack of good science laboratory and lack of equipment that they need to practicalize their work with. Government has a target of increasing enrollment as far as science education at the secondary level is concerned to 30%. And currently we are doing only 13%. By 2030, 30%. And then if you go to the tertiary level, its target is to invent the world by having science to humanity ratio to 60 to 40%. But again, as at 2021, we intended to do 50-50, but we've missed that. What the ratio now is 38 is to 62 of science to humanity ratio. It tells that we need to invest much more into science education at the base level in order to increase enrollment at the tertiary level. So what government needs to do at this point is that, yes, we understand there's a concept of virtual science lab that government is coming up with or has come up. In 2029, government launched the Open STEM education platform that is to deliver STEM education virtually. That's laudable. We just expect that could be expanded to many parts of the country. And again, for the underserved areas, especially those under the secondary education improvement plan, the grant allocation to them, there should be specification for improving science education under that particular project. And then those that are not under the seed projects, government can have a dedicated fund to them to improve their science education in the country. Thank you.
Thank you to Divine from the Africa Education Watch. This is a conversation that, nationally speaking, we have to continue if we're going to catch up with other countries in the global context. But this is how we draw the curtains on this conversation. Coming up next after the break, the St. Teresa's Catholic Private School celebrates 60 years. We have a conversation with them right here in the studio. We'll be back.